Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. K-Grow in the morning show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is September 1st, to be specific, September 1st, 2016, to get an even finer point on it. And, of course, it's Thursday, 9 o'clock, time to start another show. Anything happened yesterday? Yeah, apparently. As you know, Donald Trump gave a speech. As you know, I didn't actually watch it in real time. But, of course, I watched everybody watch it. And it was exactly what everybody thought it was going to be. Well, actually, you know what? It was a very strange phenomenon was demonstrated yesterday. It was everything everybody thought it would be who was tracking in real time. But if you were writing on the delayed and deadlined world of, I guess, most political mass media, apparently you got a very different impression of what was going on yesterday. Trump, of course, went to Mexico, and he had a very pleasant visit, so it would seem, with the president of Mexico. And I guess he did what everybody kind of thought he was going to do. There were a number of people who thought he might just be confrontational and ornery and screamy right there in Mexico. But I don't think a lot of people really expected him to do that. But I expected certainly, that if he was to control himself in Mexico and keep himself under wraps and do what he was supposed to do, that by the time he arrived in Phoenix for what was billed as a major immigration address, to outline his policy once and for all, he's going to clear everything up. A big-time policy, substantive policy address. Remember, that's how it was sold to all the networks. And so all the networks covered it. And remember also that he brought no press of his own, that is to say, American press, with him to Mexico, but left them waiting for him in Phoenix for his big finale at the end, right? So he had assembled them all for this major substantive policy address. But having behaved himself earlier in the day, and that's very difficult for him, having behaved himself, contained himself, he was unable to keep it all in for the rest of the day. This is one of those things. It's like a toddler who goes past mealtime or past nap time, and there's a meltdown. And that's exactly what happened. But in addition to all of that, there was, of course, in addition to keeping himself in check and under control while in Mexico, which is a pretty good idea, generally speaking, when you leave the country, for any reason, as anybody. Anyway, he not only kept himself under wraps, but we had this issue of him. Well, everybody knew this. He was going to Mexico. He has done nothing consistently throughout this entire campaign, if not suggest to everyone, insist to everyone that we're gonna build this wall, that he was gonna build a wall. We're gonna have a wall. We're gonna have this wall. It's gonna be so big, so beautiful. I'm gonna build it. We're gonna have it. And you know who's gonna pay for it? Mexico. Who? Mexico. It's a call and response at his rallies. I mean, there's nothing that defines his candidacy more than his reliance on the wall and the who's going to pay for it kind of thing. And so he goes to Mexico, and everyone says, I wonder if he's going to talk about the wall and how Mexico's going to pay for it. Now, granted, we did discuss yesterday that doing so as a private citizen at this point would likely be a violation of the Logan Act. However, we also noted that there was almost no way that anyone would ever be prosecuted under these circumstances under the Logan Act. Anyway, so he could certainly have ventured much further afield. But apparently he mostly behaves himself and the discussion then afterwards between, digesting the discussion between the president of Mexico and Donald Trump afterwards, we also knew as it was ending that this was going to be, actually even before it ended, it was speculated the night before last that there was really nothing preventing Donald Trump from coming out of that meeting, no matter what gets discussed or how it's discussed, and coming out and saying, yeah, Mexico agreed to pay for the wall. It's all done. It's a done deal. And then, of course, we would expect to see the Mexican president saying, no way, I did not. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. You totally did. But it went a little bit differently. Instead, for whatever reason, and I suggest that the reason is because Donald Trump is at heart actually a chicken crap and not at all the negotiator he imagines himself to be, or the tough guy he imagines himself to be. Under the gaze of the Mexicans, he has this to say: we didn't discuss the wall. At which point, in a press conference following the meeting, which was hilarious looking from what I could tell, the Mexican president said, it's Peña Nieto, is his surname, right? So the Mexican president says, yeah, we did discuss the wall. I told him, yeah, Mexico's not paying for the wall. Donald Trump says the wall wasn't discussed. He says not only was it discussed, I told him you can, well, I don't know whether he actually told him he could go screw himself, but he told him Mexico wasn't paying. And he may even have done it in as pleasant of terms, as pleasant a term, what the hell would you say? Under circumstances as pleasant as possible given the situation. I've mangled this already, but you can see he may have been diplomatic about it. I don't know. But he goes and tells the press, I don't know, did he do it at the press conference or was it done afterwards? By the time Donald Trump is done in Mexico and everybody's anticipating this speech in Phoenix, 9 Eastern, remember, we had a lot of debate back and forth over whether it was going to be, at what time this was going to take place. By the time he gets around to that, the story is now Trump said they didn't discuss the wall. The Mexican president says they did and that he isn't paying for it, but that Trump didn't have anything to say about that. He just left. And already by 9 o'clock rolls around, it's, people, it's out there in alt-right world. Well, actually they seem to anticipate this correctly, but the rest of the country was saying, uh-oh, did Donald Trump get cucked in Mexico? I know I can't stand even mentioning the term, but that's what it looked like. And it is what happened. You know, make no mistake about it, despite what he actually did in the speech yesterday. And we'll get to that, because boy, did that speech incense Armando. Armando will take over the last hour and 45 minutes of the show, no doubt, and tell you about all the reasons why that was the most disgusting thing ever seen, because he saw it and I didn't. But what actually happened, I want to emphasize this. If you take away nothing, I mean, you already have this idea in your head, but if you take away nothing else, my impression of the whole thing is when he has to look Mexican people in the eye, including particularly powerful Mexican people who can tell him to go screw himself, he's got nothing to say about this. You know what I mean? He doesn't stand pat and say, oh, you're paying for the... He waits until he's safely back in the United States, safely among his people who will cheer for him no matter what he says. And he says, what? Oh, Mexico's paying for the wall. 100%. 100%. We're building the wall and Mexico's going to pay. 100%. This is his new way of doing it. 100%. But face-to-face with the president of Mexico, mealy mouth. He has nothing to say. By the way, I noticed this also, and I noticed, let's see, who, I saw John, from America Blog, who spotted this first, according to my vision, but then I noticed that he mentioned in his article who actually had seen this thing first. One of the journalists watching along. Let me see. Did I put away the America Blog thing? Of course not. Why would I do that? Even though at the time I knew exactly what I was going to do with this thing. I'll have to look it up. But to give credit to who spotted it first. But it was pretty obvious They had, as we noted yesterday, the meeting and the press conference at Los Pinos, right? The Pines, the Mexican White House. And that was largely because in order to pull this thing off in the time frame that they mentioned, that they had for it, basically he could do no advance work. He couldn't set anything up. He didn't have the resources on the ground to get an event set up in Mexico, so they had to depend on the Mexican government to set it up. And guess what? In the Mexican White House, the podium is set up for the Mexican president, and they've got flags there for when a foreign dignitary visits. But of course, and this is the excuse for it, I mean, the real explanation for it is, and what is it? It was, as John Aravosis at America Blog notes, there's no American flag there for Trump. There's a big Mexican flag for President Peña Nieto. I'm already forgetting his names. Did I have it correctly? It was Nieta and Nieto. I can't even keep it straight at this point. But anyway, but no American flag. The reason, of course, is there's no foreign dignitary visiting. Donald Trump's foreign. He's running for president, and maybe we treat him like a dignitary here because we have to. It's contractual. It's a statutory thing. We have to give him Secret Service and all that. But he's not yet. If he's elected, he becomes a foreign dignitary. If he's unelected, he's just a foreign jerk. So you don't put the flag out for him. But great negotiator that he is. Oh, we got to negotiate. You got to be tough. You got to get great deals. Wherever I go, I get what I want. He couldn't insist on an American flag or have a setting elsewhere where he could set one up. No. So he stands there with no flag. But a tough guy, he would have insisted. Why? He would have just gritted his teeth and shook his fist and he would have got 10,000 flags. So for the first time that we could see since the nomination, Donald Trump is kind of standing there powerless to do anything about his surroundings. He can't have his way in the production of this stuff. And I guess he's staffed here maybe with a translator. So that was pretty funny, too. Anyway, he's bored to death. He's practically falling asleep. There's a couple pictures circulating of him with his eyes closed. He's just scowling. His stupid jowls are hanging. He looks like an idiot. And he's in total passive mode. And he says, and here the issue is raised. Not only did we talk about the wall, I told him to go screw himself. Got nothing to say. Until he gets back with his people, and then Scott Farkas comes out. Now that he's back with Grover, he's a tough guy. Oh, Mexico's going to pay for the wall 100%. Now, the other phenomenon going on here was, of course, that in the afternoon around deadline time, when the American political press had to start filing their stories, the story was, well, Trump did not, what can I say on the air? I was going to say, Trump did not poop himself at any point. No projectile vomiting like George H.W. Bush vomiting on the Japanese prime minister. He didn't try to go out the wrong door. Nobody threw a shoe at him. Boom. Presidential. That was the label they were hanging on him. He appeared presidential. Big win for Donald Trump. Foreign policy triumph. Yada, yada, yada. Anyway, he gets cucked on the wall discussion. And looks like a lump at the press conference and slinks away. But, you know, the low bar thing, as Bill mentioned in his opening tweet for us, you know, says, today for Daily Kos Radio's opening tweet, I almost forgot about it, but he tells us, KGRX, that's me, calls a chiropractor after hurting his back trying to limbo under Trump's low bar. That's precisely what it was. As long as he doesn't crap himself visibly, let's say, while at the podium, stumble terribly, and he didn't say anything, so that wasn't going to happen. Or attempt to murder somebody while he's there, or I guess pick up an underage girl under a modeling contract, something like that, then it was going to be presidential. So the narrative was set by the time he got back to Phoenix. And when I say set, I mean some of those stories had been submitted. they'd already written. He was presidential. He pivoted. It's all good. It's all done now. It's a contest between two senior statesmen of America now. Secretary of State and a guy who went to Mexico and didn't poop himself. Okay. Well, it very quickly changed, and watching people watch the speech was fascinating. Everything that you ever saw in a Trump rally speech, and that was so part one of the insanity in all this is that the narrative was set, and no matter what Trump is doing or saying, they're still out there saying, well, I filed a story that said he was presidential, and I don't know why. Why can't you file a new story that said, and then he blew it. He looked like a complete idiot. He melted down entirely, and he was like a toddler having a temper tantrum when he was finally let out of timeout. Nope, he's still kind of presidential. And some of the stuff last night, boy, did Alex Seatswold get murdered last night on Twitter for saying, and I don't know why he phrased it this way, and he insists that he didn't mean what it looked like he meant. And I don't know, he said something like, oh, well, both candidates, oh God, you're already starting down that road. Both candidates have staked out the most extreme positions on immigration for their parties in modern memory. Now, that's clearly true about Trump, and it's even defensively true about Hillary Clinton. It's just that, I mean, the things you have to do to stake out the most, well, you certainly don't have to go as far as Trump did to stake out the most extreme position on immigration for a Republican nominee. He just, for good measure, goes 100 miles past the post. In order to stake out the most extreme position on immigration among Democrats, all you have to do is get past that post, and that post is just not that far out. We've been cowed on immigration and everything else for a long time by conservatives, who even Democratic strategists insisted had their fingers on the pulse of the nation when it came to this issue, and so Democrats were timid on it, and so to get further left than the least timid Democrat on immigration in recent years is not a difficult thing to do. And yeah, that makes it technically the most extreme, but it's not the same thing by any measure as what's going on the Trump side. But so what? It boils down to a both sides issue. And I think Alex thought he was being super clever in that phrasing, because it was defensible, but then he pretended he didn't understand why he was getting such flack. I don't know. Everybody was coming down on him from all sides, and I guess rightly so. It was a construction designed to annoy, to irritate, and it did it. So that was part one, was the idea that somehow the narrative cannot be changed. Even when people who had already filed the story saying he was presidential were watching in real time and commenting live via Twitter that this was nuts, it was still, well, on net, it's a win. It's a big win day for Trump. He went to Mexico and didn't poop himself, and then he came home and triumphed before a wildly cheering audience. Except that, of course, wasn't supposed to be what he was doing in Phoenix. And here's problem number two. He fools the whole American press corps, makes him wait there while he takes this historic trip. Where the presidential-looking things happened was Mexico, and the press doesn't go with him to Mexico. They wait for him to come back home, thinking that there's going to be a capper on the presidential-looking thing by the delivery of a major address on substantive immigration policy. And in so doing, all the networks go and they cover this thing live. Trump is going to lay it down policy-wise on immigration, and we're going to be there live to capture this moment. The big pivot is here, and we have our cameras in place. But instead, he comes and he gives what initially you could have called his standard rally speech. And for all the networks to be fooled into covering that would have been beyond belief stupid. But it's happened before. Remember the days when we were covering his plane landing like he was the Pope. But worse, of course, is the speech he actually delivered was the worst and most vile thing he's done in long form to date. Darker even than what happened at the Republican National Convention. And all the networks were there, and they all covered it live, and they all thought they were going to get a policy address, and they all thought they were going to get substance, and they didn't. And not only didn't they got fascist garbage. And they covered it start to finish, and I think he went on for 75 minutes, screaming his head off. Don't ever let me hear you go on about a shrill Hillary Clinton again, please. Seriously, this guy, I'm laying odds that this guy Breitbart's out. He is going to stroke out and die, maybe even before the election. Might as well write it down. I'm not right. I'm going to lose that bet, but I think I don't know. He's on the path. It's at the point. Yeah, last night I was asking. You need to ask your doctor if screaming about immigration for 75 minutes is right for you. Ask your doctor if your heart is healthy for screaming about immigration for an hour. And of course, if it lasts more than 4 hours, contact your physician immediately. He goes bonkers. He fools the press into covering it start to finish, and they're like, "Where's the substance?" But then some of them are so invested that they can't say, well, that didn't happen. We didn't have that substance we were looking for. But, I think they pushed back the Maddow show. Everybody made room for the major address. But all it was, and I knew, and I think a lot of people knew, that's how I knew. I was one of those people, right? Everybody could tell. When he came out of Mexico and A, he had behaved himself, but B, by the time he got back here, everybody knew he had gotten screwed on the wall thing. I knew then this is the kind of situation where he is under wraps, where he has to give a teleprompter address. The next day's speech is a stem winder. He goes bonkers. After this, I knew there was going to be a nuclear dumpster fire meltdown at that speech. And I said so before it started, and by 9:30 it was payoff time. I knew exactly what was going to be happening, and he appears to have delivered. That's exactly what we got last night. And yet the coverage was still, people are still out there defending. Now, I have a couple of examples set aside here for all of this stuff. Well, let's see. First of all, I'll mention this. Benji Sarlin gets it right last night. He says, the Trump speech was pretty much a meltdown, and he doubled down on all of his immigration policies. He went straight back and said, we're going to deport everyone. There's actually dispute among the mainstream political press corps over whether or not Donald Trump softened. Remember, they all invested everything in he's going to soften. And everyone was laughing that he's going to soften on this thing, because that would make him look like a cuck, or maybe, I guess, all the people who, like Ann Coulter with her In Trump We Trust thing, and they all got fooled, and they all got cooked, to use their stupid term for it, when he started floating the softening thing. And then he comes out and he is more hardline than ever, and the political press is like, this could be softening. Can you believe this? They didn't specifically say, people are writing, that he was going to deport everyone. Of course, apparently he actually did specifically say that he was going to do exactly that, but they had already written that he didn't. Maybe they got an advanced copy of the speech, and I don't know how far he departed from the advanced copies of the speech, but in a telling analysis of it, a quick nutshell analysis of it. Who tweeted this? I couldn't. This one I didn't put aside, but somebody put it right, I think, and said, the Mexico visit, that was Twitter for iPhone. The Phoenix speech, Twitter for Android. You knew exactly what was going on. Kellyanne Conway ran the morning, and Steve Bannon ran the night, and he undid everything that happened in the morning. and made things even worse. But people are disputing it. The political press is disputing it. I don't know. I think he really didn't, he softened. He didn't commit to this or that and say he was definitely going to be deporting people. But of course, the speech was being cheered in real time by David Duke. But that's indicative of nothing, I'm sure. Doesn't tell us anything. Benji Sarlin actually had to tweet last night. Okay, now do you believe Trump doubled down? And he quotes a Politico story here. Several Hispanic Trump surrogates reconsider support. Several major Latino surrogates for Donald Trump are reconsidering their support for him following the Republican nominee's hardline speech on immigration Wednesday night. Jacob Monti, a member of Trump's National Hispanic Advisory Council, has resigned, and Alfonso Aguilar, the president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles, said in an interview that he is inclined to pull his support. Well, of course, we'll have to wait and see whether or not he is inclined to actually do the damn thing he's supposedly inclined to do, but we'll find out, I guess, in the coming days or hours. But, yeah, there, for some reason, a huge reluctance among the press to just say, okay, another 360-degree pivot, another situation in which he was supposed to deliver a change in tone and message and refused to do so. Mark Sumner, of course, covered the speech live and in real time from start to finish, and we can perhaps read a little bit from the way he covered it. But let's first open the doors here and invite Armando on. I know, I'm sure, well, he says he's going to be calmer today than yesterday, and I don't know if that's exactly what I want. Well, we'll take what we can get, because I think a first-person reaction to the speech would be valuable at this point. I know I really have to just start breaking my rules about watching these things, but when they do these things at 9 o'clock, it's just not possible for me. I don't know. That's supposed to be prime time, but I guess I'm just not in sync with America, for that matter. While he's talking, I'll kind of comb through it. If you didn't see Mark's live blogging of it, I think it's actually spread out over 3 front page entries yesterday, because he went on at some length, as I understand it. Now, isn't that the case, Armando?
Oh, Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I think, an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I heard, which, like I said,
it's an amazingly long speech in the modern era. I guess back in the day, they would have 2 and 3 hour speeches, but we really don't do that anymore. Whenever something goes that long, I think that was longer, actually, than his acceptance speech of the Republican nomination. Well,
of course, he literally does view it as a sign of virility.
Stamina.
Yeah. When remember he put out that web ad bragging about how long he talked and how many times he was interrupted for applause at the convention. That was rather astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, look, at this point, what can you say about Trump?
Oh, I've got a lot, but I invited you to say yours.
Okay, well, I said a lot last night, probably too much and probably in offensive ways.
Oh, okay.
But I had never been more angry in this campaign. You gave a recap of the day, and, I go back 2 days when this strange trip to Mexico leaked.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of reasons why it just was strange. First, you just don't do a major trip. Presidents don't do major trips in a day. There's a reason. There's a reason to bring the president to that place. I mean, on a substantive basis. This was obviously a political stunt. But even for presidential candidates, you need some preparation time. I mean, not just security, but what's going to happen? What's it about? What are you going to do? I mean, you can stop by a factory and do a photo op, but, you're meeting with a head of state. I mean, it's actually an important moment that requires, frankly, a level of sophistication and deft that Trump obviously never will have.
Yeah.
I think that was all weird.
He was even caught by surprise by the necessity for a statement after the meeting. I think it appears from what I was watching that he was almost caught by surprise by the idea that there would be a 2-podium press conference from which he was supposed to deliver a prepared statement of some kind. How could I prepare? I didn't know what was going to be said. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's one thing. And generally, as you know, look at the models. Foreign leader comes to Washington, and they go out to, I forget where the president does it when he walks out, and they have the two leaders there. And they'll have a very short prepared statement, generally, 5 minutes at the most. Because, most of the things they talked about, they're just not going to talk about in any way that's forthcoming. I mean, diplomacy requires, unfortunately, not the opposite of transparency. There are things you have to say privately that don't get said publicly. But this wasn't that. And, the compounding problem, of course, was the Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto, made a mistake. I mean, but let's be honest, he never thought Trump would accept. He never thought clearly. It was just hey, we sent out letters inviting, whatever. You give that to your local press people, and whatever they do, whatever they do with that.
Sending the Businessman of the Year letter for
right, that kind of thing.
Maybe people will buy a table.
It just wasn't supposed to be. But it still becomes more bizarre, because why does the Mexican president agree to see him in 1 day's notice?
Well, the leaked information, although I don't know whether it's true, they began leaking from the Trump campaign that they'd been talking for, well, in their mind, this makes a huge difference, several days, maybe even a week. And
well, no,
Kushner
what we know is that he sent out letters to both Trump and Clinton on Friday. What did Trump people pick up the phone on Saturday? I mean, let's be honest, it probably started Monday, and by Tuesday, I guess they had worked it out. But why Wednesday? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Today, the president of Mexico is doing his State of the Union speech, which I know August sounds like a weird day to do it, but apparently that's when they do it in Mexico. A weird month to do it.
You can have your own schedule. It's a different country.
That's cool. The State of the Union.
Yeah.
Our president wouldn't be taking foreign leader meetings the day before the State of the Union. It was bizarre. And beyond that, Trump in Mexico. I mean, what were they thinking? Now, let's be clear. Peña Nieto is apparently a hapless politician with a 23% approval rating in Mexico, and with corruption scandals galore. I mean, here's a guy who's already a problem, but you thought, well, he can help himself in a sort of shallow way by getting into a fight with Trump or confronting him at the very least, in a fairly public way. Mm-hmm. Afterwards. But what did the guy do? He gave a Chamber of Commerce speech about, commerce and this and that. There was a line here or there about this or that alluded to things Trump has done. But it was, it was crazy. And then Trump read from a piece of paper, whatever the heck that was. I mean, they called it presidential. I'm like, what? He read a piece of paper very, very poorly. It wasn't, even for Trump, it was a poor reading, I thought. Because he's actually gotten better at the teleprompter, but he still can't, he still doesn't know how to read from a piece of paper. He just doesn't know how. I mean, it's not an easy skill. You actually need to practice it. And the other thing, you got to know what's on the paper. You're just sort of, you should just be referring to it just to keep, make sure you're hitting your spots. Right. You don't really.
He doesn't do that kind of prep work. He's like, I speak English. You just give me the paper.
Right. Well, that's what he did. Right. I mean, Barry O'Reilly, screw it, I'll do it live. And the media's reaction was disgraceful. I mean, the idea that was presidential. How was that presidential, David? I'm prepared to listen. Explain. Take the other side. Why am I wrong to be flabbergasted that someone thought that was presidential?
Because you're such a liberal. And
because he wore a suit.
Yeah. Well,
because he stood at a podium.
Yes, he stood at a podium. He stood near a foreign leader who definitely knew that he was there and intended that to be the case. So it wasn't like creeping up on a guy and taking a quick selfie.
So let's say he had invited Gary Johnson or Jill Stein,
presidential,
and she stands there and she wears a suit.
Yeah.
Would that have been presidential?
Yes.
Well, then presidential means nothing.
Well, it doesn't mean it wouldn't have been presidential because the press isn't interested in making her presidential. So
well, that's just my point.
Right.
There's no there.
There's nothing
to the word.
Right. Presidential, like we said, I mean, even they knew that, and they admitted it was a low bar kind of a thing. But why they can't just say, this isn't even a bar. I mean, I know we're supposed to do this and set him up like, oh my God, he didn't eat anybody's face, so therefore he's presidential. But he looked out of place and ridiculous.
I thought so, but I mean, I accept that subjective. Maybe he looked in place and whatever, but presidential.
Not with his hands.
I just don't get it.
His hands like on his lower belly and his eyes closed, and I mean, he looked like an old man who
Listen,
didn't know
I was
what to
bored
do.
by Peña Nieto's speech too, so I don't blame him for like sort of slumping over.
Well, but that's not presidential.
But it's not presidential.
Right, you paint
Then
eyeballs
the
on
second
your
part
eyelids and
where they took two questions. I guess they were questions. We couldn't hear them. I mean, the whole thing was Keystone Cops. I mean, it was a terribly run operation all around. And the picture we got was like a Skype video, you know. And the translation was relatively poor of Peña Nieto's speech to the degree that I could hear it. I hated that they basically drowned it out with the translator.
But there's nobody who can speak this wacko language. We better talk right over it. Yeah.
Well, now look, I understand that, and I actually was hoping Univision or Telemundo would have it so I could hear it in Spanish, but they didn't.
Yeah, why they couldn't
carry it,
just
which
caption it.
Frankly is also bizarre. Why wouldn't the two major Spanish language networks carry the event? It struck me as weird as well.
Yeah,
but anyway,
they probably thought they were doing it right. Like, I'm not going to pretend this is presidential and cover this, and then afterwards they're like, damn, we could have had, a takedown version of it, but we didn't do it.
Right. So they have those two rather bizarre statements from both of them. I thought Peña Nieto's statement was bizarre for the moment, and you know that all of Mexico has risen in anger at the president, and he spent all night. Well, first let's get to the questions, and then we'll talk about what happened at night. He takes there's two questions. I guess Jim Acosta got to ask one for some reason, and it was about apologies or something like that.
Was that?
Trump didn't really address it, and somehow it got to whether they discussed the wall and who would pay for it. And Trump said they did not discuss if they would pay the wall. Now, the president of Mexico later said that in fact they did discuss the wall. He said there's no way ever that Mexico is going to pay for it. It's non-negotiable. Don't even bring it up. But why didn't he say it then?
I don't know. I that's what puzzled me too. I thought, if this is going to be a stunt of some kind to set up a confrontation, you're running out of time to have the confrontation.
So that would have been the moment. And in fact, it would have been a good moment, and it would have been truthful, apparently, based on what we heard afterwards. But instead, Peña Nieto sort of regurgitated his speech, but condensed it 3 or 4 minutes when he sort of responded to the question. So that was all bizarre. And then Trump jets away, and we were all listening to the media tell us how presidential Trump was, and we're all like, you got to be kidding me, or a lot of us were. And then, of course, stuff happens afterwards. Before Trump even arrives in Phoenix, the president of Mexico realized everyone's outraged at him. And he starts pushing back, and he says that he was really tough in the meeting. For example, first thing I told him, I made it clear. And this came from a tweet from the president's Twitter account. That the first thing he said to him was, "Let me make it clear, Mr. Trump, Mexico will never pay for a wall."
Okay.
Ever.
100%.
And in later tweets they said, oh, and you insulted the dignity of the Mexican people, and you should never do that. Who knows if he said that, but let's assume he did. But none of that came out in public. I mean, so it's all bizarre. And then we're waiting for Trump's speech.
So it's
and
Peña
as you
Nieto
said,
who looked presidential.
we knew he was going to come back with red meat. It's just, it chafed him to have to say that I like this little brown guy. And it chafed him to, oh, by the way, did you, Trump's speech, there was one interesting thing. He talked about, well, his statement, not his speech before, in Mexico, was talking about illegal immigration into Mexico, which is indeed an issue, and it has been for years. And Mexico deports the people who come into Mexico. And it's an issue in Mexico. Mexico's southern border, right? Right. And I thought for sure he was about to propose a great southern wall at Mexico's border. And then when you saw that was kind of okay. What somebody on his staff came up with some weird thing to throw in there, and I no one noticed it, at least in the media, except me. And that I saw. Maybe other people noticed it, but I certainly did. And it was just all bizarre. But you knew some explosions were coming. He wasn't happy with having to pretend to be nice to the Mexicans, and I think you said in your previous remarks today that you knew something was going to happen. And then what do you get? And the coverage starts in Phoenix, and you get Giuliani wearing a "Make Mexico Great Again" 2 hat. 2,
yeah, I love the 2 got thrown in there. Yeah,
Mexico's great again too.
You don't even have to say 2. I mean, but just in case you thought that we were flipping and we only have one country that we can make great at a time, and this saying "Make Mexico Great Again" means we've forgotten the project of making America great again. No. We'll cram an extra word in there just to make sure that you understand that we can make 2 countries great at the same time. Don't you worry.
The offensiveness and the ridiculousness of that hat, and that they decided to wear it, is just remarkable.
It's for all the semiotics majors in the Trump crowd.
Okay, but then we get to the main event.
Yeah.
And let me say first that Trump didn't say anything he hadn't said before.
Okay.
All right. So it wasn't that it was new. But at the end of that day, at the end of the media doing what it did, to hear, and I called it a Nuremberg speech, and I know that's offensive, and I apologize, but for me that was my immediate reaction. I feel a little less bad about having said that.
You are not alone there.
Because Josh Marshall, who's Jewish, also said it.
So there you go. You're safe.
so I feel a little better. I mean, I know I went over the top. I was so angry. I literally was shaking yesterday. That was the most hateful, scary rally speech of the entire campaign. We've watched Trump a lot. And we've watched him in Arizona, but they all had this pent-up anger. That crowd, Trump.
Yeah, one member of the press was noting that it was palpable that the crowd was having a very tough time not booing the mere mention of Mexico or Mexicans when Trump was trying to say, I'm going, that he had this successful venture down to Mexico, while he was still trying to be diplomatic about having met with the Mexican president. And they were like, come on, when do we get to the part where we can boo Mexico? It started already, lightly in the crowd. I spoke with the Mexican president. All right.
I could bore you with the litany of the offensive policies. You've heard them all before.
Yeah.
Deportation force. 1 million people have to go. We are going to root them all out.
Yeah.
Look, it's not likely to happen to me. I'm lucky. I was born here. I frankly am not brown-skinned. But I feel it just the same. And I just can't imagine what Mexican Americans and Central American Americans who came from Central America and people who are just trying to live their lives here. Must have felt like listening to the roar of hatred from the crowd. I mean, I can't rely. I'm not going to lean on Nuremberg. But what would it be like? Like George Wallace, like a Ku Klux Klan rally? What? The hatred of people who weren't white in that arena, expressed by that red-faced, shouting man, spewing pure hate.
Yeah.
It was chilling. And I guess I blew a gasket, and I just was just watching this last month of media coverage on the inanities of press conferences and seating arrangements at State Department dinners and every stupid story you've read for a month. And here we have a man who, let's forget about him just being unfit and unqualified. Let's put all that aside. Let's forget that he doesn't know anything. Let's forget that he is the most dishonest person to ever run for president. Put all that aside.
Okay.
Have we had someone who so openly based his campaign on hatred of non-white people?
It has been some time, if it has been the case.
A major part. Listen, whenever you thought of Ronald Reagan, he did not make speeches like that.
That's true. Well, yeah, very pointedly.
He would not make speeches like that. So Barry Goldwater wasn't preaching, for the most part. His policies were hatred of African Americans, but he did not speechify in that way.
Okay, yeah, it's also mostly true, yeah.
This is what is presented to us as a choice, as one of the two choices for President of the United States. And it's almost an afterthought for the media. I don't mean they don't cover Trump. They do. I don't mean they don't talk about how crazy he is. They do. They don't talk about how the main message of his campaign is basically hatred of non-whites in this country. And you were talking before about Alex Seitz Walt, and then, yes, I blew up at him inappropriately.
Oh. Okay.
But to take that moment after that speech to clinically describe, well, what I meant was they're two polar opposites. By the way, it's not true. And I would note something else about Alex Seitz Walt, which really gets my goat. He was sort of the beat reporter for MSNBC with Bernie Sanders' campaign. You know a word he never used with regard to Bernie Sanders?
Oh.
Extreme.
Okay.
By his measure, it would have been necessary and fair to describe Bernie Sanders as the most extreme candidate for the Democratic nomination ever.
I guess that's true.
And Bernie Sanders would say that's true.
Yeah.
But it's also inflammatory.
Right.
There is a rule in the law, in the courts, in litigation, in the federal rules of evidence. It's a rule that allows a judge to weigh whether the probative value of a statement is outweighed by its prejudicial nature. Yes. Alex Seitz Walt's use of extreme and say both Hillary and Trump are the most extreme nominees on immigration ever is so over-the-top prejudicial that whether you can find a way to argue that's technically true, that any responsible person would not make that statement at any time. But to make it after that speech is offensive, it was irresponsible, it was disgraceful. He should apologize for having said that. He will never apologize for it. And I'm going to offend some people now. And the reason he said that and could feel comfortable saying that is because he's white and he has no fear of Donald Trump the way people of color do.
Well,
and I believe that in my heart, that if he was not white, he would never have dared to say that.
It's amazing that you can still do it. I think one of the better encapsulations of things last night was somebody who said, if you think that you're in possession of some privilege that won't get you singled out, you better wake up because there's almost nobody this guy can't hate. And there's ask around among the alt-right backers how they feel about maybe, he did accurately describe things. Maybe a pass for Alex Seitz-Wald. No, I think they can probably find grounds on which to discriminate. There's nobody safe from this guy. But
nobody is safe. David, after I tweeted a pretty inflammatory thing about the media that got retweeted pretty far, my timeline was inundated with hundreds of racist supporters,
of course,
of Donald Trump, telling me to go home, get out,
right, home to
go to the bus station and go. I was called a beaner, a spick. Mm-hmm. I don't care about that. What I do care about is that Alex Seitz-Wald and people like him don't understand that is what Trump is about.
I have a hard time believing that he doesn't understand that.
How can he tweet
but I can't
both sides?
That's the one I don't understand. That's the part. I know he knows this. I watched a little bit. He spent a little bit of time, expressing his puzzlement. Why am I being attacked for this? It's true. Okay, I know what you're trying to do here, but I mean, you think nobody's going to think you were trying to be cute extreme? You chose that. You knew what that was going to happen.
He knew what he was doing. And it's offensive, David.
Yeah.
After that speech, that night, I'm just telling. Look, I'm going to offend him. The only reason you would thought to send that tweet is because you're white. If you weren't white, you never would have thought to tweet that. And listen, obviously not all white people. White folks reacted to it like as we did. There's some, savvy guys who said, "Oh, well, people don't like the Jew," whatever the heck they said. Mm-hmm. But come on, he was trying to be provocative, and he provoked. He certainly provoked me, and he provoked a lot of other people. Now, the night doesn't end with Alex Seitz-Wald. It continues with Alex Burns saying that somehow Trump didn't say he was for mass deportations in that speech.
Yeah.
What, are you kidding me?
It's still hanging on a technicality. There was another guy whose name I don't recognize, but who's a big enough name to have a verified check mark. And even Barb was yelling at him last night. Who was just like, this is a big shift. This is the pivot after all. And the technicality was, well, he used to say he was going to deport all 11 million.
Yeah, that was Robert Draper, who worked for the New York Times Magazine.
But now he says he'll only deport 2 million on the first day. So that's a shift. Like, what, are you crazy?
David, he said that no illegal can stay.
Yeah.
They're not self-deporting. He announced a deportation task force.
Yes. Which in the last couple days...
Did he not say, use the word 11 million? No, he said all.
Yeah.
He didn't.
How many is that? I don't know. It could be... Yeah. Right. I don't know why.
When you say all, you don't have to temper it with the number of all. All means all.
Oh, no. Well, not words, They don't actually, mean...
Listen, and Burns wasn't the worst offender. It was just... It just didn't make any sense what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
But to cap it off, you saw this. The first story the New York Times filed on Trump's day and his speech was by the execrable, and I have no apologies to him, because he is literally the worst reporter this side of Chris Cillizza. the ex-girl Patrick Healy.
Okay. All right.
Wrote a story, you must have seen this on Twitter, that went on and on about Trump's wonderful pivot, how he abandoned his deportation plans, how it was just a continuation of his, the good Trump. It was so incredible, David, that there was not a reporter in America, none of them, said, "What was this?" They all said it because it was just incredible. And it was put up by the paper of record, the New York Times,
I saw
as its first story on Trump's speech.
Yeah. And I saw the newsdiffs.org version of it. I guess that's where it first came to my attention.
Yeah, the news diff was the edits, yes.
Yeah, showing what the original version had and what they had to change it to. And yeah, I mean, what struck me about this was, although the first one was filed at 11, after 11 p.m., so the speech had been seen and digested. No, maybe not digested necessarily, but everyone had seen what had happened. So it's a pretty quick file after that.
Everybody got a copy of the prepared remarks. We didn't. Well, maybe Barb did. I didn't get the copy of the prepared remarks.
But they passed out to the press.
But they got them at 9 p.m.
Right. And people write. This is a common practice. It happens with all the State of the Union address, all this kind of thing, which is amazing, too, that this would be put on par. Oh, yeah, it's a major address. It's a major award. It's a major address. And it was a rally speech, and a terrible one at that. And I don't know what was in the prepared remarks, but apparently people wrote based on that, and that can't have been the prepared remarks that were delivered because it bears no resemblance to the speech described in the first drafts. And I'm glad the thing at least got changed, but I mean, people had just seen this thing, and really, okay, so you got fooled, you got pantsed, you got fooled into writing about the prepared remarks, and you look stupid, and everybody should note that. And that should be factored into your reporting from here on. And I can't make the deadline if he speaks till 11 because I can't write based on the prepared remarks because the guy's a charlatan and an idiot. You're going to editor. You think I'm late? You're going to fire me if I file this story based on the prepared remarks. Everybody knows that's not what's going to come out of his mouth.
David, okay, you got fooled and you wrote a useless story. You throw it in the trash can. You write a new one. They published it.
Yeah.
Some editor said, okay, this is good to go.
I guess so. I mean, who knows?
And press publish.
The box on my spreadsheet says something's written, so just move it.
I'll tell you something else. I think they don't have to close the early editions as early as they used to. But in the old days, they had to close the early edition like at 10:30, the one that goes, all over the country, right? That would have been the story in the first edition of the New York Times. I assume it wasn't because they corrected it by 11, and I think because they've actually really have modernized their printing technology amazingly. They can probably do the first edition at 12:30 now. And they have printing operations, all over the place. So it probably didn't.
Yeah, they probably could stretch these things out, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. The first version of the story seemed to be all about. It was a pivot story. He pivoted. This is it. The pivot we've all been waiting for and predicting. He did it. I saw it. You saw it. Let's all get together and talk about how it was so obvious to all of us.
Right. Jeez. What can you say? But more than that, look, I'm not even going to complain now about how they cover Clinton. I have problems with it. Fine. You're doing what you're doing. But Donald Trump is running a racist campaign. He's not hiding it. He's not dog whistling it. It's there. How come you can't say it? Remember when Hillary gave her speech detailing, and what did she do? She quoted him. She quoted Bannon. She quoted Breitbart. She quoted the people and get around Trump and who support Trump. She didn't make it up. Trump said she's a bigot.
Right.
And they treated both sides. They treated that as a both sides story.
It's race to the bottom.
Race to the bottom.
It's the same thing that they did to. It is the exact same thing that they did to Elizabeth Warren at the convention. You remember that stupid interview? Is Donald Trump a racist? Yes. Now, doesn't that make you a racist for calling him names? Well,
that was the ridiculously stupid Thomas Roberts.
Right. Racism isn't
who is stupid every day
names.
on TV, by the way.
Was that him? Okay, I don't know.
Yes. It's don't watch him, but if you ever do watch him, you don't need to watch for more than 5 minutes, and he'll be stupid because he's stupid the entire hour. I don't know how the guy
whoever it was, he didn't know what racism
He's not
meant.
qualified to be
calling people names is not racism. That's a different thing, dude. What are you talking about?
It's remarkable. But beyond that, forget what Hillary Clinton calls. What is the problem? I mean, Trump's embracing it. He's not. This isn't, some independent third-party expenditure that does a Willie Horton ad, so they can basically say, "Oh, I don't have anything to do with that. That's not my campaign." It's him.
Yeah. I
don't get it. I guess I do get it, but I don't want to get it.
Well, that may be the case. I've always. I mean, it's no different in many ways than so many other things that we've seen. That the press doesn't have a working model for dealing with something like this. It's just a matter of it being beyond their capacity, or it's I don't want to be the first one out of the box to be like, all right, we have to write that one of the two major parties is headed by a candidate who's insane or an outright racist, if you don't think that's necessarily an insane thing to be. But just
Trump has absolutely baffled them on how to cover him.
How do you write the torture story? How do you write the racist candidate story?
That's a good analogy. It's like the torture story.
We just can't say it.
They can't wrap their heads around how to say it because it defies their conventions.
Yeah, it's being disputed,
how to
so we
do
have
journalism.
to, first of all, we can't possibly be torturing. Second of all, it is disputed, so I have to note the dispute. I got to teach the controversy. Teach the controversy.
David,
Trump's not a racist.
The one thing I would point out, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. I'm not going anywhere.
Ron Fournier, of all people,
right? Yeah.
said Trump is unacceptably racist.
I don't know that because I'm blocked.
Well, no, he didn't tweet it.
Oh, okay.
I'm blocked too. I actually read it at the Atlantic.
Okay.
I'm actually fairly proud of the people who are blocking me now. So that's a good thing. If Ron Fournier can do that, you're telling me the New York Times can't?
Well, he left there, so. Now he's at a publication that accepts that because
isn't that like a permission slip?
No, a magazine is not a permission slip. A newspaper, the New York Times is a permission slip for USA Today, not vice versa. If you get it in USA Today, they don't.
Yet the USA Today was very harsh on Trump.
Yeah, well, they don't.
That's nice.
There's no permission slip for the New York Times. It's its own thing.
Yeah, they don't need permission slips by and large. And look, I've said it, and I want to be calm and rational about this. The editor of the New York Times is a fellow named Dean Baquet, who office politicked his way into getting Jill Abraham fired, and he took over the paper. And it's a disaster. He's been a disaster.
Oh well.
I mean, can the Sulzbergers be looking at what Baquet has done to their newspaper and say, yeah, we're good with that?
Well, there's no content in the spreadsheets. That's what they're looking at.
No, they're losing money, though.
Well, they always lose money. So.
This isn't Zucker at CNN where the ratings went up.
Well,
the circulation is going down. Advertising revenue is going down.
Well, internet something. Yeah, I'm sure they have plenty.
But it's not growing. It's growing slower on the internet than other publications.
Well, something. Technology. I don't know.
It's not succeeding on any level, is what I'm saying. You can't defend it as a journalistic enterprise. You can't defend it as a business decision.
Well, I don't. I don't bother doing any of that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I appreciate sometimes the New York Times reporting on a lot of things, but yeah, I mean, as a the editorial side where they're trying to decide, and they're very often very ticklish issues, yes, but I don't know who they think I don't know where they think they publish. It's not going to be an unpopular thing to come right out and say what's going on.
I mean, they're not going the Fox News is not their demographic.
Right. So they don't have to worry about that. But, and I guess these aren't the same people anymore, but it's the same publication where, just thinking back, even beyond the torture story, was the incredible thing. I guess the first thing that made me just really smack my forehead in my adult life about the New York Times, anyway.
Enhanced interrogation, if you will,
that
please.
Was yeah, right. Before that was well, geez, we better sit on the warrantless surveillance story lest we affect the outcome of the election, which is, of course, everybody's reason for publishing. You absolutely want to have an impact on the election. You don't want to necessarily change the direction of it. Well, too bad. I mean, what do you do with the murder on Fifth Avenue story? Well, geez, he did say he could shoot anybody on Fifth Avenue and not lose a vote. But we better not test that, because that could change the outcome of the election. So let's sit on the murder story. I mean, honestly, you find out that the government is, what they were saying, I mean, what I think was really happening was we're petrified with fear post 9/11 that we'll be branded as somehow unpatriotic or un-American for revealing this. They were afraid of being the first Edward Snowden, I guess, and they were going to have to flee to Russia to stay out of captivity. And so instead they said, well, it was really about, we didn't want to affect the outcome of the election, which was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard the New York Times say about itself. They can't wait to affect the outcome of an election. That's why they live.
Exactly.
If they can affect the outcome of an election,
it's hardly a reason to hold news. It's, if you think it actually will impact the election, that's a reason to publish it, not to not publish
and
it.
And if it's a bare fact and it's verified, I mean, you can't be attacked for publishing opinion and being biased. I'm not biased. This happened. This is real. But you will impact the election, and that's bias. And they bought that because it was easier than saying I thought we would be arrested, because they're supposed to stand for for tolerating that. I might be arrested. Let them do it, because First Amendment. I believe in it. And they didn't believe in it. They didn't believe in it because the crazy George W. Bush administration, I think by that point, had made it clear that they probably would try to arrest you for doing something like that. And they thought that they could get away with doing it too. And I guess the New York Times believed them. And instead they came up with this stupid excuse of, we don't want to affect the election by telling people what's happening in it. Really? Then I guess we're done here. No, we'll continue publishing. And then they couldn't do it for torture. I can't say torture because somebody who's torturing people says, this isn't torture. And I got to teach that controversy. And now we have to teach the racism controversy. There is, we're even having public papers now printing is there really such a thing as an alt-right angle? I don't know. That may be a made-up thing by leftists looking to set up conservatives for some kind of conspiracy theory. Thankfully, that hasn't made it out of the trade papers yet, like The Hill. But I imagine that will be recycled shortly. Whether or not it makes the New York Times, we have yet to see. But I don't know. Well, instead we get this. Well, we get they're both extreme, and it's a big pivot, and it's a shift. And he's not saying 11 million, he's saying all of them, but we don't know what number that is, so I can't tell you whether there's 11 million people or not, because that would, I don't know, affect the outcome of the election, I guess.
Listen, it's last night and just this morning, Latinos for Trump, people like Alfonso Aguilar, who likes to think of themselves as relatively serious people, basically said, I can no longer support Trump after that speech.
Did he finally make his mind
up? Yeah, he did it this
there?
morning.
Okay.
This morning he said he's no longer supporting Trump.
Okay.
Now, this is a guy that was out there the last 2 weeks on every show basically saying Trump didn't mean it. He's not going to be this way. We had a great meeting with him at Trump Tower. And there was a fellow named Jacob Monty from Houston, who I don't know personally. I know Aguilar. I don't know him, but I mean, I know of him. They knew what was said in that speech. They understood it. And yet, Patrick Healy wrote a first draft and the New York Times published it. And even its second draft doesn't get it. But that's, it's so much better than the first one. Maybe that was the plan, to soften it up and make the second one acceptable. I mean, I tweeted, I said about Aguilar, I'll say about the New York Times. Anybody who associates and tries to soften and normalize Donald Trump will get humiliated every time. He will humiliate you. And those who don't recognize it by now, I mean, look, think about this. I mean, look, the New York Times gets attacked all the time.
That's true.
When it was okay, when it wasn't okay. When it was great and when it was good. Obviously, different partisans will attack it. But can you honestly tell me that anyone has the same respect for the New York Times that it did a year ago?
Those inside the New York Times still have it.
I bet there are people inside the New York Times who are dismayed.
There are some, I'm sure. But the ones that make the decisions, of course, I think are sticking by the old saw of, well, we're attacked by both sides, so we must be doing something right.
Being right.
Because, I don't know what. Let me ask you this. Are the attacks from both sides equally extreme? I wonder. Or are they the most extreme ever? Or is it the people who are attacking you are the most extreme? He's not at the New York Times, I know. But, it's the old both sides thing. Both sides are attacking us. One's, pointing to things we actually do, and the other's not, but the point is attacks are being leveled. All right.
Yeah, I mean, but think about, again, I'm harping on the New York Times because it is still, for better or worse, the paper of record. And even in a total media landscape that is failing and doesn't have a model to deal with a Trump candidacy, the New York Times stands out as incredibly incompetent. Not believable. They published a story that was just flat out incredibly wrong. To the point that, a slew of journalists, their peers, said, "You got to be kidding me."
Yeah. Yeah, it's an exercise. It's interesting that they do this in an exercise to build credibility too. Well, we have to acknowledge when Trump does something like when he executes a pivot, if we don't say so, we'll rightly be called out for left-wing bias. So in order to appear fair, we have to in order to maintain an image of credibility, we have to say this highly incredible thing. Okay, seems like a bargain. I think it'll work. Let's do it.
Okay, and here he goes again. I just see this on Twitter. He was, I guess, on Laura Ingraham's radio show, and she asks him, the line last week, you were softening on immigration. Then you come out with a very specific, very pro-enforcement plan last night. Mm-hmm. Where's the softening? I mean, Laura Ingraham saying, of course you didn't soften. But here's Trump's answer. Oh, there's softening. Look, we do it in a very humane way. What do you do in a very humane way? Split up families?
Nothing.
Throw people out of the country? Send them to the farthest reaches? We listened to your speech last night.
Yes. By the way, humanity used to be one of those things that literally went without saying when you talk about having a policy. Like, they never stopped and said, "Excuse me, Mr. President, are you going to do this in a humane fashion?" Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we're going to do that torture, but in a humane way.
Right. But in a good way. It's true. I mean, but it used to go without saying that we would, but the fact that he has to go back and clarify, well, we're going to do it in a humane way. Not to mention the fact that, well, the things you're doing are inhumane. They can't be done in a humane way. In his view, of course, deporting you or splitting up the families. Well, I'm not going to make you sit on broken glass in the bus. That's humane. I'm going to drag you across the border physically and dump you there in Mexico, whether that's your country of origin or not. Well, you know, but I'm not gonna stab you in the ass on your way. So that's humane. Oh, okay. I'm gonna write that down there. Humane. Got it. It's good.
But just to remark on that though, isn't it amazing he gave that speech last night, and someone said you went over the top or that was too much, or Kellyanne Conway talked to him just before he went on Laura Ingraham. And now he's saying that. He's trying to... The guy... I think... let's be clear. The guy last night is Trump. That's who he is.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious to watch him after the last person speaks to him, then just sort of do the other thing. Because he is so insecure, so craving for approval, that he'll just turn on a dime in outlandish ways and try to spin something as something else. Look, I guarantee you he'll deny it was a softening this afternoon.
Yeah. If he's speaking to somebody who didn't want to hear
if
that.
If Bannon gets him.
Yeah, he speaks to his crowd, even if his crowd is one. If Laura Ingraham wants a hard message, then there it is. But, well, didn't you say you were going to soften? Yeah, humane. We're going to humane it. I'm going to put some humaneness in there. That was they did that the other day. I thought that was a rather remarkable thing that I think Reince Priebus said. Well, we're going to go back and pepper the policies with humaneness and decency. Like these are additives that we have in a jar at the end. You better get out the decency and humaneness powder and sprinkle it on our policy. How much? Don't waste the stuff, just whatever the minimum amount is. And whatever the minimum number of pieces of flair needs to be. Put a little of that on there.
It's just incredible. And I get, you know, and I just looked at Jennifer Epstein. It was not terrible. You know, complaining about lack of access to the candidate on the campaign trail. To be honest with you, I think they have a legitimate beef there. I think the Clinton campaign needs to make her more available to the campaign press. That's fair. I do think that's a fair complaint. But that still doesn't excuse you, because obviously Trump doesn't have campaign access either. I mean, everything they say is multiplied by 10 with Trump. But it doesn't matter if the tools that you're given to operate journalistically aren't what they should be or ideal. You still have to do your job. You can't abdicate because, well, I didn't get to talk to Hillary and ask her 3 questions on the campaign plane. It just doesn't work the way. Now, to be honest with you, I'm someone who doesn't believe much in questions to candidates, and I want to go dig up facts. They don't really come from the candidate. Candidates just sort of blah, blah, blah you.
Yeah.
That's why tax returns are so important. They're paper. You get to pour over them. You don't even have to ask questions. You report on what's in the documents, right?
Yeah. I'm agreeing with you there. I'm not a big, huge press the person with questions guy, but that's because I don't do it. I understand that that's a major tool for some people, and although honestly, when I sit there, if I'm at an event, well, you know, and people they open things up for questions, or does anybody have any questions? I'm always amazed at the people who come up with questions, and then I'm like, you didn't know the answer to that, but that's
exactly.
Not, they wanted to
Google. We have Google now.
They wanted to get my job.
80% of the things they ask. Yeah. You know, and what's his name? Tim Fernholz actually did an analysis of what the press actually calls a press conference, because they deny that the press conference at the National Black Journalists and Hispanic Journalists conference was a press conference. So it was one back in December.
I can't help you. It's a press conference.
Fernholz went through it.
Yeah.
And he basically analyzed, and half the questions were just plain stupid, and the answer was already known.
Yeah.
No follow-up. And the other, there was like 2 good questions out of 10. And she answered the 2 good questions, and she sort of just like, she didn't literally roll her eyes, but she gave a rolling her eyes out answer. She says, like, I've answered that one 50 times. It's a major policy that I have on my website. Are you telling me that's the question you're going to ask me here, now?
Right. Well, for most journalists, the exercise is getting a quote. Like, editors are taught to tell their people.
She gives speeches. You can quote her speech.
You got to give me a quote. But everybody has access to the one that's in the speech. Not everybody has access to this brand new one that you generated by asking a question that was designed to elicit an answer similar to the one given in the speech, but worded differently. And now, if they want to quote that, then it has to be, in an answer to NBC's so-and-so, she said, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, most press conference stuff, occasionally you get a winner of an answer, or you bring up an issue that either hasn't gotten enough attention. I can see those sorts of things, but yeah, 9 out of 10 questions out of them, even discounting the dumb, what about your gaffes, or are you going to smoke a Cuban cigar questions. The ones that are supposedly substantive, that everybody, for whatever reason, applauds as serious journalism, I find to be mostly a big waste of time, right?
David, there's a perfect example. The email questions, why she did the server.
Yeah.
How many times has she been asked? Not just by reporters, by the FBI,
right?
By the Benghazi committee. She must have answered that question 25 times. Yes. And her answer is pretty much the same.
Right.
Until the last one, when she was asked by Anderson Cooper. And what she said was, look, if I try to explain it, it looks like I'm excusing it. I'm not excusing it. There's no excuse. So that's my answer. I made a mistake. I'll never do it again. And I'll leave it at that. Everyone loved that answer. Which is hilarious because what it was a non-answer.
Right, essentially. Yeah.
So what you wanted was a non-answer.
Oh, well, that's good because we're having a non-press conference right now, which you're getting non-answers. Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, I guess that really spells it out pretty clearly.
Just think about it. She gave a 4-minute answer on the setup of her email server at the non-press conference. The short circuit answer.
Okay.
And got pilloried for it. She actually took it seriously, thought you really wanted to know, and went through the litany one last time, but in a tremendous amount of detail. Literally, it was a 4-minute answer. And just got crucified for it. More questions arise from her answer. Then the next time she was made available, on it, or at least the most recent one, she answered Anderson Cooper the way I just described, which was explaining is excusing, and I'm not excusing it. It was a terrible mistake, and I will never do it again. And whoop-de-doo, that was the winning answer. And I thought so, too, at the time. It's funny because I took it from an optics perspective. I said, that's the answer. Stick to that one.
Yeah. Optics can affect everything. I mean, that's what drives that's the excuse for asking the same email question over and over as it is. The twist on it is, given that, up to this point, everyone has asked you this question over and over again and still is not satisfied, doesn't it appear, isn't it a matter of optics, that today, since no additional answers have been given, doesn't that look like another day has passed during which you haven't answered the questions, your comments? Yes, 24 hours have passed. You got me. Well, but doesn't it look worse today than it did yesterday? Not a lot. Probably
it looks
not
the
at
same.
all.
It's looked the same.
It's just
Since
older
last summer.
and more annoying, I think, is what's happening. It's certainly more annoying for me. It's more annoying for you because there's no new information. But that's because there's
been no new
information
since last summer.
Still, it is annoying if you're waiting for new information and there isn't any. You've nailed the issue of there not being new information, and you've gotten a sidebar additional story out of it by saying there haven't been any press conferences to deliver that non-existent new information because it doesn't exist. But now we're into our second, third, fourth week of there haven't been any press conferences to discuss that thing about which there's nothing new. But it's a broader topic now because you could ask me about something else that hasn't changed, and it's true that I haven't given you the opportunity to do that. Doesn't that look bad? And doesn't that look a day worse than it did yesterday? You have a point there. And tomorrow it will probably look another day worse than that, unless time begins running backwards, which is a possibility we haven't considered yet. But thinking about that, we haven't discussed that in at least 4 weeks, and maybe it's time for a press conference on that. Most press conferences, just like most conferences of all kinds, are either filled with questions that were answered, or if you really want to come up with like a really penetrating question. And this is why I almost never have any questions. I can never think of anything that can't also be answered by, that's a really good question, and I don't think that that's going to require some research. I would love to get back to you on that question as soon as we can do a little bit of background checking, because I don't actually know the best questions in the world, the hardest questions in the world, will simply elicit that. At which point everybody says, okay, and either writes she didn't have any immediate comment on it, or they just hold it and wait for the response later. The rest of the questions are, you've said immigration is an important issue. Would you say it's like a 6.9 on a scale of 10 or a 7.1? Leaving aside the possibility that it's a 7, which is what you said last week. Yeah, it's trending upward. Either that or else, what about your gaffes and are you going to smoke a Cuban cigar? Even good policy questions generally just come around to, yeah, that's great. As I've said before, here's something that almost fits that thing. I know, but follow-up, that's not exactly it. Yeah, I know. You're actually breaching new ground here. And curiously enough, this would actually be a terrible forum to try to wing it, because it's a press conference, and this really requires sitting down with advisors and doing some research and some brainstorming and crafting a message because we want to get it right. But you insisted that we should do this, so here we are. And guess what? The answer to all your fantasy questions is, I'll get back to you on that. In a format that I was using before, but that you insisted I switch to this one. So here's the answer. I'll get back to you on that.
You actually remind me of a West Wing episode when Leo McGarry is the vice presidential candidate. Remember the whole
I remember that
Vinnie
twist,
Santos
yes.
campaign? And he had some addiction issues or something. I forget what the story was. And they were practicing what he would say to the press at a press conference. And he said, I've made a lot of statements on that. I'll just refer you back to those. I was like, where'd that come from? I mean, that's a good idea.
Well, that's
I refer you to my previous statement on the subject.
That's a standard answer in Prime Minister's Question Time. The ultimate press conference, by the way, is populated almost entirely after the first 15 minutes with, I refer the honorable gentleman to the reply I gave some moments ago. That was John Major's favorite line anyway. And you see that quite a lot because they're doing the same thing that you do at a hearing, which is another super important formality that we have got to have on various subjects, or else it hasn't been covered correctly. And members of Congress, there are very few questions that are insightful and short enough to get on the evening news. And so they just all ask the same one over and over again, and the witnesses have to answer each time, but for a different camera. It's not even literally a different camera. It's the same camera, but for being digested and put up on a different location at a different time in the roll on satellite, so that different media markets can download different parts of the tape in which the witness answers the same question, but posed by 8 different members of Congress from the various markets. Same thing. Everybody
amazing.
wants to get the question asked. So he's a racist, and he still is. But he makes news with it every day somehow. So,
Yeah, well,
There you
yes, and they make news.
Yeah.
2 stories today. One in NBC News reported that after she left the State Department,
yes.
and this is not, I'm actually going to read the tweet to you,
All
and
right.
I'll let you react to the tweet without my editorializing.
That is ridiculous.
NBC News: Clinton sent email via private server to State Department staff after leaving job. What's your reaction to that?
Just the headline? That's what you should do. If you're not at the State Department, but you want to communicate with somebody via email, you use a private email. If you're a private citizen, even if yesterday you were the department head, and today you're not, you're now not entitled to use that email address. You got to use a private server. That's the answer.
I mean, isn't it? How could it be anything but that? Was she supposed to keep using a State Department?
No. If she did that,
Server?
then the headline would be Hillary Clinton illegally uses government email after resigning.
And someone decided to publish that as a story.
Yes. Well, that's a good one. Sun mysteriously declines to set in the East. It's another way of putting it.
That's what I'm getting. I mean, I know, I hear you. I mean, it's just, isn't it amazing? Someone
Yes.
said when she no longer was in the State Department, she didn't use a State Department email.
Right.
That's the story.
Yes. Well, it
And
could have been
someone
a very
decided,
classified
yeah,
goodbye.
let's run with that.
Maybe she said goodbye in classified code, but did it on an open channel, and therefore the Germans cracked Enigma.
Okay, so the other story that I want to point to is by the infamous Ken Vogel of Politico, and it said that Bill Clinton used government funds to augment the salaries of some of his aides and to pay for his server.
And his sister is a thespian.
Let's unpack it, because the last part, the Clinton campaign actually denied and said there was no government money in. But I thought that was unnecessary. You know where the money comes from, right? It's not like Bill Clinton went and stole it from the Treasury, right?
I thought he dug into Fort Knox.
Right. I mean, he didn't steal the money. It's under the
Did not
that
steal
President's Act that
money.
gives them that budget
Yeah.
to spend for their office and for aides. I mean, literally, that's what it's for.
And he did it? Wow. Yeah, I saw something about that go by this morning, and it was, again, but this appears to have been the proper thing to do, or that it was within contemplation, certainly, or mandated by federal law.
I'm trying to find the name of the law.
Yeah.
It's, it's when Harry Truman didn't have any money. In 1958, they passed a law that gives past presidents, like what, $1 million budget or something like that.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't, but they do.
Right. And literally, no one has ever said a word about that
Right.
till now. I mean, and it's in this campaign, because I don't think anybody said about it from 2001 to 2008 when he was, I assume, doing the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I did see that one this morning. Brad Woodhouse retweeting that one. The Politico. Bill Clinton used tax dollars to subsidize foundation.
Yeah, that's a private email.
server. And then it says, this proactive headline is followed by a completely newsless story. It shows things were done right, not wrong. Whoops. All right. Well,
And does the media not wonder then why the Clintons just don't trust dealing with them?
I guess. Although I do sometimes wonder why they can't just say, "Yeah, I mean, look, these guys screw us left and right." But it's not like not holding a press conference is preventing them from doing that. So, on the other hand, I do acknowledge it's not like holding a press conference will stop them from doing that, and they might not even stop them from doing that about press conferences. Oh, sure, you held a press conference. We only asked you for 15 of them, and you had one. Wow, you're so good at this. Yeah, all right. Well, we're going to get those stories anyway. So, I don't know.
Well, let me read from that story because I really think it's amazing. The thousands of pages of newly uncovered records. I don't know how newly uncovered they really are. I mean, what, are you kidding me? He's been out of office for 16 years. I don't think these are newly uncovered. Or you've been sitting on them for, you haven't asked for them.
Yeah. They didn't want to affect the election.
So. Well, anyway, it says, reveals sometimes granular detail about how Bill Clinton's representatives directed the spending of taxpayer cash.
God damn it. Yeah.
Allocated by the GSA under the Former President's Act. The Act authorizes the GSA to fund the pensions, correspondence, support staff, and travel of ex-presidents.
Yeah.
It was passed in 1958 to maintain the dignity of the presidency by helping former commanders-in-chief avoid hard times like those that befell Harry Truman, who complained that without help from Uncle Sam, he would be forced to, quote, go ahead with some contracts to keep ahead of the house, close quote. The Clintons did not have this problem.
They didn't. That's true.
Well, they didn't because they went out and made money.
Well, yeah. They didn't have that problem.
And by the way, they made money in a way that you've been criticizing all this time.
Yes. So, I mean, I guess you could say, do we want an amendment to the law that it's need-based? I don't think. Well, all right, fine.
Well, let's suppose we want to means test the President's Act
along with Social Security,
which is ridiculous. But let's
sure.
Let's just say that.
Okay. Then what? I don't know. Oh, I'm on hold there. Okay. So I don't know. I'm not certain what they thought they were going to get out of.
Wait, I just wanted to finish the thought. Unfortunately, the call came in right when I was about to make a startling point.
All right, then I'm ready.
Okay. Did Politico look to see if George W. Bush is using money to augment staff and pay for a computer at the Bush Library?
He did a computer. Yeah, paint my numbers maybe, but no. That's a good question. Is he paying for his paints out of taxpayer dollars? It's all fungible, so the answer is yes. I had to lean back in the chair. I was waiting for the big stunning reveal there, and I am stunned by that. They haven't checked, just like we found out yesterday. Nobody checked about Colin Powell's foundations.
Oh, thanks for bringing that one up, because there's actually a real point here, though.
Oh.
Forget about Colin Powell.
Easy enough.
Forget about that whole thing. Oh, that was the past. Colin Powell is a special individual who's never done a thing wrong in his entire life. So, Colin Powell is sui generis, and no one would ever question the integrity of the great Colin Powell. John Kerry. People sure didn't have any problem questioning his integrity in 2004, right?
Right.
He's the Secretary of State now.
Yes.
Correct? Last I looked. His wife is a very rich woman.
Yeah.
She has a very prominent foundation called the Heinz Foundation. That raises money from a lot of people.
57 different varieties of money.
Yeah, but my point, where my point is. Who's checking John Kerry's schedule to see if he's meeting with Heinz Foundation donors? This is the current Secretary of State.
He's not running for... Yeah.
So, again, I'm taking this as a lawyer. So you're saying... Since the difference is he's not running for president, right?
Yeah,
that's the difference?
That'll be what, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So the issue then isn't Secretary of States having family foundations that they really have connections to.
It's ambitious.
It's if they run for president after.
Yes, which he did. But I forgot to check. But I will later, if he runs again. I'm very busy. You don't
So it's not
understand.
really an ethical issue. It's just presidential bull.
Yeah, right. Why are you so busy? There's no press conferences being held. What are you doing?
I mean, and they can't. Have you ever heard a reporter respond to that? I tried to actually have a conversation with Nick Confessori about this.
Oh. Well,
And,
yeah.
and Nick's a good reporter, but he is so full of it on this.
Well, yeah.
And I say, Nick, wait a second.
A fine
It
answer
wasn't an
is
issue
my
before.
editor
He says,
doesn't
well, that's
care.
just, okay, maybe we should have, but that
Yes.
doesn't mean it's not a story now. And I said,
Okay.
well, if it's a story now, what about John Kerry? Oh, well, he's not running for president. Okay, so you basically can be as Clintonian as they can be
Yeah.
when it comes to questions to you.
He isn't running for president. It depends what the meaning of the word is.
He is
running for president if it's 2004, which it's not, but it could be. That's the real point. And I mean, look, I understand what they're saying. What they're really saying is, and it's easy enough to get rid of that question if that makes you uncomfortable. You say, you know what? You're right. Maybe we should have. We didn't. That didn't
We're
come
starting
up
now.
before. We're starting now. We're going to. But my editor would have nothing to do with look back at this point. But I suggest that they probably would. As a sidebar, what if your story was blah, 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 everyone knows about the Clinton Foundation thing, da, da, da. And guess what? So we looked at past secretaries of state who had foundations with which they were affiliated, directly or indirectly, through familial connections. And this is what we found, just so you could have this is what we would call historical context for the story, and it actually makes you look like you're doing deeper reporting, but it does take some time. And
it softens the story. It makes it less
Yeah.
anti-Clinton.
that's
That's
There's
the way they
that.
don't do it. I
Yep.
mean, that's what's
I
obvious
guess.
to me. Now, look,
Well,
the
they're
president's
busy.
argument doesn't work well either unless you admit you did it wrong before, because,
Which they did.
as
They didn't
you've
know
heard
about
the
it.
reporting, the Bush 41 library took money from the Saudis while George W. Bush was president.
Mm-hmm.
No one said that was a problem. No one.
we didn't
And he wasn't
realize
even a
it.
freaking charity. It was for that stupid library.
Yeah. That cancer curing library. That
So,
AIDS-treating
I just
library.
don't think there's any way they can plausibly deny that there is a Clinton standard that doesn't apply to everybody else. She's guilty until proven innocent. Everybody else, you need to find a story that leads to making an issue.
I guess so. Certainly anybody running for president, there's going to be a heightened sensitivity around everything, and you can get away with writing stories that half conclude.
You say that,
Oh.
and the reason, but Donald Trump has a foundation. Donald Trump has a business.
Yes, well, and Donald Trump has some very highly questionable businesses, and you can make a lot of assumptions, although and make big stories out of him, although they do tend to run off of his back because he's such a sleazeball as it is.
Yeah,
Like,
sure,
for
but
instance-
you should be covering them.
Yeah,
Are they news? Are they is it a journalistic obligation to talk about it? I mean, if the Clinton Foundation is worth covering, and how do you deal with the conflicts if she wins?
Yeah.
Donald Trump's business is just a minefield.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already dirty. Imagine if he's president.
Yeah. Well, it would be a disaster, and I guess part of I guess the corollary to he's not running for president thing, it's similar. Donald Trump isn't running for president. Well, okay, technically he is, but the point is, this sort of reporting that Clinton is facing, well, okay, nothing happens to anybody, I think, at the same level, but if you have a chance of winning, it's worse. If you're written off from the beginning, they let a lot of things slide. This is going to be a large investment in time to make a sleazy guy look sleazy. He's not going to win. And then, of course, he won. Dang. Well, then my excuse is I didn't want to affect the outcome of the election. Why not? Why not more major outlets for, say, the Mother Jones story that Joan was begging me not to discuss yesterday, that Trump has a whole stable of young and very often underage foreign models that he imports and stashes in apartments in the East Village and has them work modeling jobs illegally with no work visas, et cetera, et cetera.
Hey, that's actually an explosive story.
Yeah.
And,
Screw it.
nobody cares. It
Yeah.
literally has been picked up by no one.
Yeah. Well, okay.
The
it hasn't been
Associated
enough
Press, who
time
picked
yet,
up
but-
everything, didn't have a story on
Yeah.
it.
I keep telling everybody that, I keep saying, of course, because I know it to be true, that Donald Trump totally did not secretly videotape people changing in bikinis at Mar-a-Lago when he was cajoling them into this thing. But if you looked into it, I don't know, maybe it would be true. Now, how do you start to do something like that? Geez, I don't know. But don't we think it's irresponsible not to ask the question?
I don't know if I believe that story. I do believe he listened
I'll
in on
take
everybody's conversation.
Well, we know about that one. That's why it's so interesting that a question to look at the videotaping. He was already eavesdropping on all of them, too. But he just happened to have a designated room with a bunch of bikinis in it that he made a habit of bringing beautiful models to and then cajoling them into changing. And he knew exactly where they were going to do it. And he's the kind of guy who was eavesdropping on phone calls at the same time. Anyway, who knows? Maybe not. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he didn't have Big Brother cameras in the apartments where he kept the model girls. I just think it's a strange coincidence, a strange mix of facts that we know about him. For instance, as somebody was tweeting around this morning, one of his more famous quotes, Emily's List, noting his favorite quote, or a quote about him, saying this is his sort of approach to the media in general. It doesn't really matter what the media write as long as you've got a young and beautiful piece of ass, he says. That's just the Donald talking. He's just a guy. He's a man's man who, a man who stashes young models in apartments around New York City, who invites them over to Mar-a-Lago and not only wants them to change into bikinis, but I want you to do it right here at this spot. No reason. This room, right here. Don't worry. I'll turn around. I'll close the door. Don't worry about it. No one's going to see anything. I'm really definitely not going to, but just make sure you do it right here in this spot for no particular reason while I listen to the phone calls of all the guests. In the meantime, I have like I said, an apartment full of young girls that I imported from around the world. They're all under personal modeling contract somehow, to me, by the way, and I hold their passports, and if they don't do what I want, I have the threat of deportation to hold over their head. But nothing unseemly is happening here. I'm just saying it would be irresponsible not to speculate, is all I'm saying. But go ahead. The press conference issue is the one we want to know about. And
I mean,
there's
I think
no
it's
reason to be
interesting
suspicious because he only, picked one of those models out to have sex with and marry.
If you think about it, what you just said was how the media covers a Clinton story.
Oh, my God, I'm guilty of journalism.
Well, come on, you're playing a speculative, irresponsible game, and I get it.
Who
I mean, I
knows
think
what's
I got
out
the joke.
there?
Maybe I did.
Look, if he wants to deny it, let him have a press conference and do it.
There you go.
I just pounded the table.
Okay, you're
so
all
I'm
right.
right.
So I think it's something
saying,
that
the
would be
facts add
explosive, etc. But that's how they treat a Clinton Foundation story.
Well, let's say he did it all correctly and by the book. Why not tweet out a headline about that?
There's
That
still an
makes it look-
appearance issue.
Yeah. And isn't it something that he hasn't answered this in all this time? How many days are we going to have to wait to figure out what happened in those apartments? I don't know. Well, questions are being asked. Many people are. I'm not saying I have these questions. I know the answer. I'm just saying many people are asking. The answer is no, but I mean, the point is I know the answer. That's all I'm saying. Somebody may find out I'm wrong.
Asking, unfortunately.
Right.
It's the kind of thing that I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
these are the days
why
that
not?
you say,
Go for it. Anything can
how did
happen.
we get here?
I don't know. Well, last night you had the answer. You blamed it all on the media. So that's easy enough.
That doesn't get me anywhere, though. I mean, my rage went through, and now I'm just, I feel like a manic depressive,
You're genuine.
I had a
You're
fit of
speaking from
rage,
the
and now
heart.
I'm in a deep depression.
He tells it like it is.
Maybe
Armando
Trump is a manic
does.
depressive.
Oh, maybe. That could, well, he certainly acts like it. He tweets like one. Of course, it's not him tweeting, but all I'm saying is his name gets attached to him, so he owns them all. And if you looked at his timeline, Could you not get a doctor on TV to say, I don't know, this exhibits some serious signs?
Yeah, I mean,
impressive behavior.
so did you ever see?
Sad.
Did you ever see Hannity's Fox News thing where he had the doctors and one of the guy came in with a lab coat?
like an
He sat in the
infomercial.
chair with the lab coat on.
Yeah.
It was the funniest thing.
Yeah. It's a little example.
It was like a Three Stooges segment.
He should have had one of those big reflector things like up
Yeah,
on his forehead too.
It would have been funny. Yeah, he should have had the reflector thing. That would have made it
It's my
perfect.
doctor beam. Shoot lasers out of here.
Hey, look for it. It's the funniest thing. I think the guy has scrubs on and a lab coat.
Yeah, because he's that kind of doctor. Just came from the.
Came from surgery
Yeah.
just to come tell you about what's wrong with Hillary's whatever
Yeah.
the theory is.
All right. Well, so that speech sucked. Yesterday was terrible. We have that on the record now.
I think it was, as I said, not new in any particular.
Mm-hmm.
It was new in the level of hate that came through, and in the context of all that had come the days before, made it especially frightening. And I think the media, maybe did better than I give them credit for, but the New York Times certainly was as bad as I'm saying.
I want to include this thing that Rebecca Romans reminded me of. What about the angel moms? I guess is they're now called. The angel moms. Now,
I did miss talking about that.
Angels,
the angel moms, and
yeah.
I actually have some points. Give me 2 minutes.
Yeah,
You recall I went to a Trump rally in March in Florida,
right?
And there was an angel mom who told a 10-minute story, terrible, horrible story about how her son got murdered by an undocumented, and it was all Marco Rubio's fault back then.
Well, yeah, he did it.
Well,
but
here,
okay.
what it was, like 15 people came across. But one of the thing that I noted about it, and I didn't know if you noticed it, some of the stories. One was from 1989. One was from 2002. One was from 2005. Did you notice that?
Oh, no.
Well, I did. I noticed someone, you don't want to go after people like this who've suffered terrible losses no matter how long ago they did.
Because that would be like going after Kaiser Khan.
It would be. And even Sean Smith's mother, who, it was disgraceful. It was disgraceful that they put her on and started the whole lock her up. She invented lock her up.
Oh.
Sean Smith's stepmother, and it's not his mother's, his stepmother, but she raised him, so it's his mother. But I just thought it was amazing. I mean, he got, I think, at least 3 that announced the dates was a long time ago, and well before Obama became president. And, oh, by the way, the Secretary of State doesn't handle immigration. If anybody actually cares about, who you want to blame, but that's what I have to say about the angel moms. It was, the typical. It's Trump at his going low, and when you examine it, it really doesn't have much to do with Hillary Clinton or, for that matter, Barack Obama.
Right. Well, it was always kind of a ludicrous approach to everything. And of course, people are wondering all sorts about, what murders don't matter if they're committed by citizens somehow. Well, it doesn't necessarily go that far, but the whole look, we get it. If you're talking about people who are here supposedly illegally, that opens and shuts the case. What they did afterwards, really, okay, ought not to be a concern. But when it's a murder, okay. But
that's the theory, and he's saying everybody has to leave. So what they did when they were here isn't going to be a differentiating statistic or a differentiating point to the policy. If you're saying everybody has to leave,
well, they're deporting all these illegal or undocumented immigrants. What about the undocumented immigrants who were killed by stray bullets that would otherwise, but for their presence, have hit citizens? We never think about that. All these poor citizens are now going to start being killed in the place of the undocumented immigrants who were murdered while they were here, too. And Thanks, Donald, you just murdered me. This is your fault. But no, well, we're only thinking about these. And I love the fact that they called them angel moms, and that fits with the snowflake parents things and what other beautiful, wonderful labels that they want to hang on. Now, okay. That was a particularly low point as well.
Right. Anyway, there is you got 5 minutes, but I noticed there's a tropical storm that might turn into a hurricane. It's going to hit the panhandle of Florida, maybe straight. It seems to be aimed straight at Tallahassee.
Okay.
Florida, but, so hopefully everyone can survive that safely and
get out of there. Hawaii got
and do what they got to do, but
Good luck, everybody. Well, we'll help out because we still have a competent administration in place, and any problems, let us know.
Sorry, David, I took that call. Anyway, I'm going to let you wrap up. Thanks for letting me more calmly discuss what I sort of went off the deep end on last night.
You have rehabilitated yourself.
I do think my points stand. I think I expressed them hopefully a little more reasonably today, and I hope maybe the media will change. But Greg has confidence. He thinks that there's going to be a pivot in the media. I'm forever skeptical of that.
I like pivots.
We will see.
People love pivots. They're waiting on it. Okay.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you. All right. I think we can deal with that. All right. Let's see. Well, let's see. I don't think we have any. Yeah, that's about it in terms of our time left. Our 5 minutes are actually mostly occupied with wrapping up just a little bit early and reading off all the great things that you'll hear about on the after show, because we spent the whole thing on Trump in Mexico and the aftermath yesterday. But that's where my head was, and maybe a lot of you there too. And we had to give Armando a chance to rehabilitate himself. I've got plenty of good stuff lined up for Friday, and I need a couple minutes just to do a little bit of a gun fail catch up at some point. Yesterday was a hell of a day for gun fail, and lots of the people who are involved in these gun fails are, in fact, I think, citizens of the United States, natural-born citizens of the United States of America, and yet they got themselves in tremendous trouble with their guns, and I'll give you the details of all of that. I'll probably tweet them all out because I got a mini tweet storm in mind, so look out for that. But in the meantime, while you're waiting for the tweet storm, I'll tell you what you can hear just by keeping it here on Netroots Radio for the next hour and, hey, all day long as far as I'm concerned. Let's see, if it's Thursday, which it is, that makes it the Thank God It's Jovity version of the After Show with Wink and Justice, which comes up next. What's up on tap for today? An Oregon white supremacist. What? No way. Brutally killed a black teen. Oh, it brought me back down again. While his girlfriend cheered him on. What a nice girlfriend. She's very supportive. She's into white supremacy herself. We need to put a stop to this sort of thing. A new study reports that Scientology's anti-vaxxer celebrities are responsible for making America sick. Someone is, and I suspect that they are the ones. And legal scholars say the FBI committed serious crimes for running a child porn website, which they're supposed to fight the running of, that also has grave repercussions for internet privacy.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the K-Grow in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
On the last half today, they'll be reporting on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce using the Trump playbook to invent absurd claims about fossil fuels, and neuroscientists at Oxford University explore the biological basis of not giving a crap. We'll clean that one up for the radio. All that plus the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Kos Community Calendar and more on the After Show next.